This interview was done in October of 2023. I reached out to Andy about doing this because I wanted to make a video on Camp Cold Brook, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And Andy was very receptive of this. The video did not happen in the end because, funnily enough, it's hard to get people to talk about a 5-year-old movie. As this was my first interview for this channel, it's a bit rough in regards to me. I genuinely did not expect Andy to talk to me for an hour and 38 minutes about his career and about movies in general and everything, when he could be hard at work, working. Instead, he talked about a 5-year-old film. And, I mean, who wants to promote a 5-year-old film? It's interesting that my first interview would end up being one of my favorite things ever because I got to talk with a filmmaker that I really respect, whose movies that I really love the hell out of. And he didn't need to do this at all. So I will be forever grateful to Andy for this interview. He kicks ass. Fucking legend. And I hope he gets a shitload more movies and has a very, very successful career. Thanks again for joining me for today. Would you be able to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Andy Palmer. I am an independent film director. I have done 7 films so far. Started off in horror movies, doing movies like the Funhouse Massacre and Camp Cold Brook, and most recently just had a movie released called The Re-Education of Molly Singer. It's out right now.
Yes, it's now out in Australia though, which I didn't get to watch it.
Well, we just sold internationally to Australia, so you guys will be getting it at some point. So
okay.
the deal just went through a few weeks ago, so at some point.
Oh, great.
You guys are going to get it.
So in preparation for this, I went back and I watched all of your films, including...
Oh boy, wow. Thank you for doing that, but sorry about that.
I even watched Sleepwalker.
Oh man, Sleepwalker, that's going back. That's going back, sir. Wow. I can't get that off IMDb, but I'm glad that you got to see it.
Really?
They won't let me. They're like, it's here forever.
Yeah. But well, I wanted to be prepared, and if you wouldn't mind, I wouldn't mind going a bit into them.
Sure, of course, please.
Because, like, so, you know, I'm doing this retrospective on Camp Cold Brook because it's one of my favorite movies. And sorry, autism brain. So,
no worries.
And I was like, it was the only movie of yours that I have actually watched. And so, as I said, I went back and I watched all your movies. And I could probably do a retrospective on your entire career because you've done some really interesting stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that.
Like, and quite a bit of them, I was like, oh, I wouldn't mind talking about actually pretty much all of them. But once again, they didn't so you do independent films.
Yeah.
And in Australia, we don't really get that.
Yeah, because you guys have more like government, like you guys like will have like government funded films, right?
No, well, like, I mean, we don't get that sort of stuff in cinema. The majority of independent films from America, I get from reading like Bloody Disgusting and Dread Central.
Right.
That's actually how I found Camp Cold Brook because there's no way we would get that sort of thing in Australia.
Gotcha. Oh, interesting.
And well, even independent Australian films aren't really promoted here. We get like the big budget Hollywood stuff.
Right, right. Oh, that's too
Yeah.
bad. Yeah, because it's like, I mean, I will say that like for us, this sort of new boom in streaming services is that like at least my films they kind of exist and they're on all sorts of different platforms. So whether people want to
Oh
watch it
yeah.
on Tubi or Peacock or something like that, they're sort of all available.
Well, that's where I watched most of them on Tubi.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm glad Australia has Tubi.
I am too. I have really fallen in love with Tubi because their library is amazing. I have been like
Oh yeah.
rattling through the old Roger Corman movies and the New World Picture movies, and like they have an amazing selection. And they do have commercial breaks, but they're super short. They usually do like two or
Yeah,
three
of course.
commercials,
Yeah.
and then you're back into it. Because other platforms, even like Roku and stuff like that, they'll do like 6 commercials, and you're just like, by the time you're done with the commercials, you're like, well, do I even want to watch the movie again? So I like that Tubi keeps it limited.
The best thing about Roku is that it has Reno 911 on it.
Yeah, baby. That
Yeah.
I am very good friends with good old Carlos Alazraki from Reno
Well,
911.
we're gonna get into that.
Awesome.
So as I said, I haven't watched Re-Education yet, but I was gonna go from latest to um earliest.
Great.
So I watched Witness Infection, and the one thing I wrote down that I really want to talk about is that it just can't be a coincidence that you've got Maurice LaMarche, Tara
Hmm.
Strong, and Carlos Alazraki,
Yeah.
and 3 massive voice actors,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
is that a coincidence?
No. No, this movie was from the mind of Carlos Alazraki and
Yeah.
Jill Michelle Malian. They wrote it. They brought me in. It was a really interesting movie for me because it was the first movie that I had probably the least amount of input from a director standpoint because they had already been like, oh, we're going to go get Brett Ernst. We're going to get Maurice LaMarche. We're going to go get Tara Strong. Like they had cast Aaron Hayes and stuff like that. So I had very little feedback or anything into the casting of the film. Those were all people that Carlos was very close to, and he wanted them to be in a movie that he had written. So yeah, but it was great because they're all amazingly talented human beings. So that's like going in and coaching the Yankees. You're like, well,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I didn't get to pick the players, but it is the Yankees.
Yeah, well, you've worked with Carlos a few times as well,
Hmm. Yep.
and I guess you've got that relationship, and I'm guessing you're also a Reno 911 fan.
I love Reno 911. I think it's
Oh,
hysterical. I not only do I love Carlos for a time before we got Jamie Presley, just for because of scheduling conflicts. We had Wendy McClendon Covey attached to Molly Singer. I'm a huge fan. I got to do a short film with Carlos that Cedric Yarborough was in. That whole cast is
okay.
just amazing. So yeah, I love them all.
What short film was that?
It was called The Callback. I don't know if it's again. This was sort of like an
Oh
invention of
yeah.
Carlos that he directed, and that I kind of came in and helped him on. But it was a really funny short. Carlos plays like an actor that goes on vacation for the first time ever, and of course gets the callback he's been waiting for. And so his agent, who's played by legendary Elaine Boozler from Saturday Night Live, basically tells him, "You're the only one they want. They just want to see you in person." Then he shows up, and there's 20 people sitting in the lobby waiting to audition for the project.
Yeah, that's acting life.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And then I watched Justice for Vincent,
Hmm.
and I can only imagine that was a very emotional film to create.
Really emotional. Yeah, definitely a departure for me. Lawrence
Yeah.
Chow, who was the writer producer, came to me. We were at one point rep by the same management company, and it was a really personal project to him. Just to give you an idea of how poorly history is taught in the States, I had actually never heard of the Vincent Chin case in my life until Lawrence let me know about it. And yeah, once you start doing research, you just find out how tragic the story was, and how heroic his mother was.
Yeah.
And we wanted, to in a short way capture that as best we could. And I think Lawrence did a really beautiful job on the writing side, and even in a short film, trying to kind of capture that emotion.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wrote down that I didn't even get a chance to appreciate the cinematography because I was too enthralled in the story and what
Oh
was
wow,
going on.
that's great. Don't tell
Yeah.
Justin Janowitz, my DP, but that's great that you were that much into the story. I like that.
No, well, we'll get to the cinematography because that was so. Another thing is like, you know, the reason I want to focus on Camp Cold Brook, which we'll get to,
Hmm.
the first time I watched it, I reached out to you on Instagram. I commented, and you replied back. Um, but like, I watch quite a few independent horror films or independent films in general. But this was like one of the first times I was like, I gotta reach out and tell them about this movie because
Wow.
I don't think it actually got that well
No, no,
received.
absolutely.
And
Probably my least successful film, to be honest with you. Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, oh, all these beats that happened are my kind of stuff because uh, don't get me started on like The Conjuring and everything.
Right.
I like atmospheric and kind of down tempo than big and loud and screamy and
Yeah. Well, yes, this was your movie then.
yeah.
Nice and slow until the chaos starts for sure.
Well, that was also kind of Find Me as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Badlands of Cain was um so I watched that I just went into it. I didn't really read up on anything. And
Yeah.
I thought it was gonna be like a Texas Chainsaw thing, middle or small town America, Hicksville kind of movie, but it was a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah, it was. It was you nailed it. It was kind of my attempt to make a feature film version of a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah,
And Rochelle DeMaria, who had written the script, she was in Find Me, and she had
yeah.
pitched this idea because it had sort of happened to her when she was driving through Arizona one time. Her car broke down, and she got towed into this little town, and the car just kept not being fixed. And so, what was supposed to be, sort of a 1 day delay. Uh, Manifested into her staying there for 3 days, and she sort of joked to herself at one point, like, what if they never let me leave? And so we were like, you
What
got to
if
write that,
something
that's
does
amazing.
happen?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, and we were really fortunate. I love Rochelle. She was in Justice for Vincent, she was in
yeah.
Find Me. I'm a huge fan of her. And her and Jordan Belfi, who was in Badlands of Cain, they actually had a showmance after the movie wrapped, and they're married and have a kid now. So at least, if
Okay.
nothing else, Badlands of Cain, helped bring two cute kids together.
Yeah. And Paul Soter was in that, and
Yeah,
I'm a massive Broken Lizard fan.
right. You're gonna love him, and he's also in. Him and Carlos are both in Molly Singer as well, and
Oh, okay.
and Paul is hysterical in Molly Singer. He's very funny in it.
Well, yeah, he comes from comedy chops, and I did watch the interview you guys did, hosted by Ben.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking about how he wanted to finally do drama
Hmm.
because comes from comedy, and yeah, I see Club Dread is another movie that I want to sort of feature
Yeah.
because no one really liked that movie.
I think it may be the best Broken Lizard movie.
Oh yeah.
I love Super Troopers, but I think Club Dread is genius. Being a
Oh,
massive Jimmy Buffett fan, and so is it Coconut? What is Bill Paxton's name? I can't
Coconut Pete.
remember. Yeah, Coconut Pete, and it's like his like take on Margaritaville and so. I just thought that was so genius.
The problem with that movie was that it came after Super Troopers, and everyone wanted Super Troopers too.
Yeah, yep,
And then
yep,
they released this comedy horror slasher film,
yep,
and Kevin, who played Father, was the hero now.
yeah, yep,
It
yep.
completely subverted expectations, and I don't think people got what they were going for.
No, I totally agree. I think that folks get so used to these characters, and when you have these sort of ensemble, troops and stuff like that, when they play somebody massively different, I think that's maybe something that like Judd Apatow and that crew got right in
Yeah,
their movies is that the characters always sort of play a derivative version of something you've seen in the other movies, so it's not like a huge leap. Whereas I think you're totally right. In Club Dread, all the characters are sort of massively different than their counterparts
Oh yeah.
in Super Troopers, and that maybe was just too much for the audience to handle.
If it had come out like now,
Yeah,
and maybe Super Troopers 2 did follow it, and it came out now, I think people would get it more. But I am trying to reach out to them to try and do something like this, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
well, I talked to Paul quite a bit, so I'll put you on his radar, see if you can't snag him for an interview at some point.
I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm working with Paul on another project that he wrote that we're trying to get off the ground, and then he's
cool.
starring in a movie that I'm editing right now, a horror movie called Marshmallow. So yeah, I work with Paul quite a bit.
Marshmallow. So you're constantly working and working and working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as much as I can, either between directing or editing, because you gotta pay them bills.
Of course. So now on to Funhouse Massacre, and Scotty Thompson's in that, and I'm a massive 12 Monkeys fan. She was in the TV show.
Yeah, she was. Yeah,
episodes.
She's fantastic, man. She's somebody that I have not had a chance to work with again, and I would love to. She came in very last minute. She was, I think, the last person that we cast in the movie. And I mean, it was like we cast her, and then 2 days later, she was down there in what was a really like very fun but sort of chaotic. I mean, we bit off more than we could chew with that movie. You know, we were kind of stupid, jumping budgetarily from something like Badlands of Cain, which was, $150,000, to Funhouse Massacre, which was like a $1.2 million budget. And for us, not sort of realizing like that, like when you jump budgets that much in your mind, you're like, well, now we have all the money in the world. We can do whatever we want. And then you start to like truly scale up, and you understand how quickly $1.2 million just vanishes when you start, you move up a tier, you're moving up pay scales for everybody. Actors cost way more.
Oh yeah.
And we had this kind of, scopy movie that we did for what would be considered a nickel and dime operation.
Oh yeah. Well, 1.2 million, and movies, as you said, just. Well, I mean, I was gonna say that was like a big movie, because like you had extras aplenty, you had all these effects, you had just everything going on, and you've done biggish movies before that, but not at that scale. And I was like, as a director, you would have to be like, that extra has to do that. You have to keep an eye on absolutely everything going on, and it would just be like, so that scene when.
No, go ahead. No, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That scene when he gets the microphone shoved down his throat, and then they start killing everyone, and I'm like, that's a big scene, because you got everyone going everywhere.
Yeah. Well, that was fun. That was funny too, because that scene was actually written like much more ambitiously, where there was this sort of like free for all between Deputy, Ben Bagley's character, Deputy, whatever his name. I'm like blanking right now. Shows where I am in my day. And then Doyle, Deputy Doyle, and then all these other guys were supposed to like get in this big wrestling match with Rocco, and Rocco throws them into beer kegs, and the beer kegs explode, and there was this whole thing. And we got to the point where my AD Eli Barker was like, "Man, you're never gonna get through that. Like you have like 2 days to shoot all of this chaos stuff." And he's like, "You're never gonna do it." And so he's like, "You got to figure out something." And so I went into the laundry room of the hotel I was staying at, and was like, I got to figure something out. And I literally was like, I'm just going to Indiana Jones this shit, where, you have this sort of big buildup with Rocco, and then Doyle, shoots him with in one shot after missing everything the entire movie. So that was sort of my ode to Raiders in that moment. But it really comedically worked out great.
Yeah. Sorry, just a sip of water.
No, I got some too.
Now I didn't bring up the absolute greatness. You had Robert England and
Yeah.
Clint Howard, and I'm just like, Robert England was only like at the beginning, but it's still like work. Of course, you're a horror fan, and then you're like, one day you're on set with Robert England, and it's like,
Yeah.
great
It
time.
was it was amazing. And he is amazing because he's such a nice guy and so generous, and like he was there for 2 days, but he just comes in and he just cares so much. I mean, I walked into his trailer and he sat down, we went through the scene, he had all these things beat it out, he had these sort of alt lines that he wanted to try out, but he's very respectful. He's like, I think I'd like to try this if this is okay with you. And I'm like, Robert, your show, my friend, absolutely, let's try whatever you want. And the thing that I when I really sort of fell in love with him is Candice DeVisser, who played Dollface. This was her first movie, so she had very little experience, and Robert just sort of in those couple scenes they had together really took her under his wing. There's this sort of nice steady cam shot where they're going down the long hallway and he's talking about the asylum, and she
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of kept stepping into his, in front of the frame of him. And he was so good about, like, within the scene, not being like, all right, cut it, she's doing this. He would like position his body so that he would like move his body back into frame and then sort of naturally move her out of frame. And it becomes this really nice moment in the movie, like real subtle moment in the movie. But that was actually Robert just sort of teaching a new actor
Yeah.
not to step into his own frame, and it was really cool.
Yeah, amazing guy. And we'll get to Candace as well because she was in Camp Cold Brook, and
Yep.
Michael was also in Camp Cold Brook.
Yep.
Yep.
If you notice, there's a theme. I like to go back to the actors that I worked with before that I love.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was gonna say you work with all these people, and I guess it works out because you know they know what you like and you know what they're like, and
Yeah.
it works out well. Um, so Alien Strain, I watched that last night, and
Interesting. I'm very interested to see what you think about that.
so well, I really like the psychological angle that you guys had, and that was kind of like a Twilight Zone. No, well, it was more Outer Limits.
Yeah. It definitely felt more Outer Limits. So that was an interesting movie. I actually had nothing. My producing partner had produced that, and they went out and shot it. And when they got done, the initial editor came back and they did like a cut of the movie, and they had shot the movie for 20 plus days and stuff like that, which on a little indie like that was a lot of days. But it was a first time director, and I think they sort of struggled, narratively and also in just shooting the movie. So the movie was like 60 minutes long, which is not long enough to be considered a feature film. You need to get to about 80 minutes. So Warner asked me to come on board and sort of do like a recut and then also write, a sort of B storyline that could supplement the holes that they were seeing in the initial shoot.
Okay.
So I wrote that. Actually, it was one of the writers from Find Me had written a section of like this sort of asylum thing, and so she and I sort of hashed out the story together, and then I went and directed. So all that asylum stuff became sort of secondary to supplement, some of the plot stuff that they were missing in the original shoot. So that was sort of how that came about.
So the psychological angle wasn't there at the beginning.
Not really, no. The whole like
okay.
asylum aspect and like was she or wasn't she? Was this in his head or something like that? No, it was much more like a straight up sort of alien abduction story. But it was just there was just stuff that it's too many leaps that you had to take. So we invented this sort of is he in the hospital? Is this real? Is it not? Scenario.
Yeah, I really like that because it plays with that mental health angle.
Yeah.
And Rolf Saxon was in that. Did you actually end up working with him?
I didn't. No, that was all the other director. Yeah, I worked with Michael, the two Michaels, I'm blanking on their last names, who played our main character and the doctor. And so yeah, so I specifically shot all of the all of the asylum stuff, and then a couple days of pickups out in the desert. But yeah, I didn't work with any of the other cast.
Oh, that's a shame because Rolf Saxon is a voice actor as well, and he voices George Stobart from Broken Sword.
Oh,
And
no kidding. That's awesome. I didn't
I'm
know
a
that.
massive Broken Sword fan.
Nice. Very cool.
So now find me. I wrote down great little ghost story. I really like great little ghost stories and self-contained because I'm guessing you were like, we've got this great house, let's use it. It
Yeah.
was old, but not too old, but it still could be used in a creepy way.
Yeah. Yeah. We shot that in my hometown. So that the sort of the genesis of that movie was I was still trying to find, funding for any sort of feature. I'd done a lot of shorts, Sleepwalker and a bunch of other things. And I was still looking to, try to get a feature off the ground. One of my childhood best friends called me. He and his partner had a plumbing company that was doing particularly well, and they were both huge movie fans. And so they asked me if they gave me $40,000, could I go shoot a movie? And I was like, you bet your butt I can. And so they were still back in my hometown, and we decided we would shoot it out there because we just had so many more resources. We shot at
Yeah.
my old high school, all these sort of places that we knew we could have access to. And one of those houses was a friend of a friend. It was this ranch house, and man, it just served perfectly. I loved that, like, you could sort of see, from one end to the other, from the front door all the way to the back, and so that created some very nice, like, sort of long, creepy angles and stuff like that. And yeah, so we caravanned out. Kat and Cam, the writer, producer, and stars of the movie, caravanned out with us. We had all of our lights and cameras all in a Ford minivan, and we just caravanned out to Colorado together. And we lived in a house right next to that house. So that was sort of the crew house, and it was just like, a bunch of friends making a movie, sort of the best way to shoot your first movie.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, so onto the cinematography.
Yeah.
Like you always seem to. I'm going to be talking you up a bit because talking about. Well, this is mainly about you. I'm trying not to talk that much because
Sure. No,
I want.
I'm loving it.
So you always seem to get great shots, even in like Witness Infection and Badlands of Cain and Funhouse Massacre. You had always seemed to be like have really nice shots that I wouldn't really get from other directors.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely have your own style. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think that I've definitely gone through evolutions as a director where I was concerned more with, like, where I was concerned more with, individual shots of things and stuff like that. And I've been really lucky that I've worked with different DPs in different films. I've worked with Philippe Vandiwall since Funhouse Massacre. He and I really, bonded very much so. And he's done every movie since Funhouse. But before that, when I had Josh Gibson and I had Harry Lipnick, they were both perfect because Josh was, he had come from low budget. He knew how to, like, stretch any sort of resources that we needed and stuff like that. He was never like, oh, well, if we don't have this, we can't shoot this. And he was, really flexible with me. And so I was very much like, it was that Find Me was probably the most, like, almost like storyboarded movie I did, where it was just like,
Oh, okay.
the shots were sort of, lined up in my head, or as we went. And then Harry was very visual, almost like painterly visual. So in the pickups for Alien Strain is where I first worked with him. And then on Badlands of Cain, I relied on him much more on shots because he just composed really beautiful images and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And so I was sort of free more to work with the actors, which was interesting. And then Philippe sort of bridged all of that, where Philippe, I remember the first time we met him, told me to just stop talking about shots. And he's like, what is the blocking? He goes, just don't worry about shots. Talk to me about the blocking. What are the actors doing in the scene? And that sort of changed my whole perspective on filmmaking. And I
Oh,
became
okay.
like obsessed with blocking a scene. Where do the actors move in a scene? And then that will dictate where the shots come from. And that was incredibly freeing because it allowed me to have a much tighter, sort of like more control of the set and more interaction with the actors. And it kind of like gave them the freedom to move, have ideas and stuff like that, but not be so bogged down with like rigidity of shots where they're
Yeah.
a little bit more free to move around the scene, and we sort of work it out that way. And then and if you focus on blocking, all of a sudden shots become so much easier. There's a shot in Witness Infection that I'm particularly proud of. Right when after Carlo finds out that he has to marry Tara Strong's character, we start on a sort of profile close up of Brett Ernst, and the camera's just sitting there, and he laughs, and then we just sort of pan over, and Carlos and Rob Belushi come in, and then we just sort of pan back, and that whole scene is just done in one shot, and the camera is just going left and right, and if you position the actors in the perfect way, then you don't need to do as much with the camera, and you're knocking out 5 or 6 shots in one go.
Yeah. Well, it's, working with different people gives you different ideas, and you just take them in. But you were mentioning your previous DP saying that you wanted to milk every resource for what you've got.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that's kind of the Roger Corman school of filmmaking.
Definitely. Yeah.
And
yeah.
you were mentioning you're a Roger Corman fan, and I'm like, oh, that fits in.
Yeah, I'm a big Roger Corman fan, and that was why, like, on Cold Brook, working with Joe Dante was so amazing because he came from the Roger Corman school of filmmaking, and so I got to talk with Joe a lot about working with Roger and sort of the way that they worked and the resources that they had or didn't have, I guess, is the probably more accurate. And yeah, it was very similar, and it's amazing how much technology has changed and allowed for that. I mean, even from when we shot Find Me, the camera, that Canon camera was really probably, we shot on the C300, and it was probably one of the first, cinema cameras that was actually really pretty decent in low light. And so we didn't need a huge grip truck of lights and stuff like that. And now, it's like, I just got the new iPhone 5, which I was struggling getting Skype going. But other than that, it's been amazing. And particularly the camera, I'm just blown away at the quality of this camera that's in my pocket. And I'm like, I'm going to shoot a movie on this thing. This thing is incredible.
Well, they've shot movies on those.
They have. I mean, and I'm
iPhones.
a fan. I love Soderbergh's Unsane. I thought that looked amazing on the iPhone. But I will say that even from what he shot that on the iPhone versus this new generation where you can shoot in and I'm going to get super nerdy with you right now, but you can shoot in ProRes log onto a hard drive from your phone. And, I'm seeing, reports where this phone is getting, 12, 13 stops of dynamic range. That's more dynamic range than the camera we used on Find Me. And it's a phone. It's like, it just blows my mind. Like, you're just like, wow, this is like this isn't like an experimental thing. This becomes like a legitimate piece of filming gear.
Well, they aren't cheap though. So I guess they realize that they have to give you.
I mean, like when I started out, I mean, I came in right at that cusp of digital video versus film, and so comparatively to film, it's not even in the same ballpark. But even when I started out, to be able to rent a decent HD was a Sony, F900 or a Panasonic VariCam, and those things were $100,000, and now you're literally sitting with a pretty decent cinema camera for under $1,000 in your hand. It's pretty amazing.
Well, another thing as well is oh god, what are they called? How did my mind bloody blank? They go up in the air.
Oh, the drones. Yes.
Drones.
The drones. I mean, totally crazy.
Because it used to be helicopters.
Yes. And you'd have to pay. From the time of Find Me to, Camp Cold Brook, it was helicopters, and on Camp
Yeah.
Cold Brook was the first movie that I used a drone, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing, like
Yeah,
it's just,
I know.
it just
You had a
buys you
few
so
drone
much.
shots in there.
Yeah, we do.
And like, well, we'll get to Camp Cold Brook. Sorry, I did have a few
That's all
things
right. We're
to.
jumping the filmography. We're going crazy today.
So, oh yeah, and another thing about Find Me, there was not one jump scare, and I fucking love that.
All right. I appreciate that. And I don't know if it's just that I'm not good at making them or I myself don't like them because they scare the crap out of me, but I try to like limit the crazy jump scares,
See, I think they're bloody cheap.
Yeah.
And no, give me someone walking behind, like,
Yeah.
we'll get to it, but like, my favorite scene in Camp Cold Brook is when Jack wakes up or he can't sleep, and then he gets up, looks out the window, sees the fire still on, gets the camera,
Yeah.
goes around, and like, you have a musical sting there when. So he's out, and then you have like a musical sting, and he's like, I know you guys heard that. And then he walks around and sees the symbol, and he just films, and we see the ghosts of the children in the background,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no jump scare, there's no big thing or anything, and I'm like, this is because it's the threat. I love the threat. I
Yeah.
would prefer to be like, is something gonna happen? Is something gonna happen? He's walking around, there's potential that something's gonna happen, but nothing happens, and sometimes it's good to have nothing happening.
Yeah. I agree with you. And I think that it's like you have to lay those tracks so that if you do have a jump scare, it's somewhat effective,
Yeah.
later in the movie. And I agree with you. I'm really glad you mentioned that because that was I think that may be the most like effective scene I've ever cut in terms of like creating tension. We shot the whole movie handheld, but when the movie was originally sort of pitched to me, it was like, oh, it's a found footage movie, and I was like, I don't want to shoot a found footage movie. But I
Oh,
liked
okay.
the idea of like incorporating elements of that. So we wrote in those elements of like, oh, here's these cameras and they have a gimbal. And so the idea was that like we're going to shoot the movie sort of freestyle and handheld, more like a Peter Berg
Yeah.
style movie. And then when we get to the found footage, we're going to make everything sort of glassy smooth. But what that created was this sort of like feeling of dread, the moment. And
Yeah.
I honestly wish we would have exercised that technique a little bit more because we only do it twice in the movie, but both scenes are pretty effective in their scares using it,
Yeah. There's one thing that I've like, even though it's my favorite scene in the movie, I would have loved to see it without any actual music.
Mm.
And then just see, because that adds even more tension.
Interesting. Yeah.
Just natural sound. But it is what it is, and as I said, it's my favorite scene in the film. So what happened to Blood Moon?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's wow, man. Deep cuts. That was a script that I had written with my buddy Levi years and years ago. It was like the first thing we ever wrote from beginning to end. And then I was editing TV shows with my buddy Jeremy Parr, and he kind of came on board, and we were going to direct it together, and we just tried like heck to get that movie made, and we went and shot like a little spec trailer for it and stuff like that. And it was just something that never got off the ground. And but it in so many ways it laid the tracks. Warner, my producing partner, who's produced every single one of my movies, that's how I met him, was through that script. He had read it and liked it and wanted to try to get it made for us. And then it ended up, I called him on a project that I had been brought on to produce, and that's how we sort of started our partnership. So in that regard, it laid the tracks. But yeah, it's just a movie that never got off the ground. I'm sure that if I went back to that script now, I'd be like, oh boy, was this any good?
Well, scripts can be rewritten.
That's true. That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Well, I mean, going into Alien Strain, it wouldn't have been the same movie if you hadn't have come in and fixed it up.
Yeah, that's where my editing acumen sort of really came into play. Is that, I came up as an editor, and I still work as an editor. In fact, if we turn my camera around, you can see that I'm working on a show right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
So there you go. But yeah, that's where sort of my editor brain took over and was like, all right, here's how we're going to fill in these holes from a
Yeah.
story perspective.
So you did a TV pilot for a TV show called Stay Alive.
Yeah.
Was that based on the video game movie from 2006 or new property?
No, new property. It was actually based on an old MTV show. So it was a Viacom show, but it was going to be on CMT, which is Country Music Television. And I was brought in. I had edited a ton of shows for this company, and it was actually based on an MTV show called Fear, where it was like they take all these kids into like a haunted asylum and leave them in there overnight, and they supposedly would hear things and see things and get really freaked out. So it was sort of
Okay.
this. It was a reality television show, and then it was brought to me as that they wanted to create that sort of atmosphere but make it more cinematic. So they had actually just the executive producer Christian Sabara had just seen Camp Cold Brook. I'd sent him the trailer, and he's like, "Oh, I got this project. You got to come in for this." And so I sort of pitched them an idea, and Alex Carl, who wrote Camp Cold Brook, came in and wrote the sort
Yeah.
of storyline for the show. And we went
Oh,
out and
okay.
shot at this old hospital out in Fullerton, California. Honestly, one of the most fun experiences I've ever had, because it was this true hybrid between a reality show and a movie, and man, we edited the heck out of it. In fact, one of my best friends, who's an editor on the show I'm working on now, he was one of my other editors on that project, and we put our heart and soul into it. And Country Music Television, they loved it. They were like, "We're going to do this," and we were just so excited. Like I was like, "Oh my God, this is my first TV show. This is going to be so great." And then Viacom had a whole, all these new people came in and took over Viacom, who owns CMT and MTV
Okay.
and all these
Yeah.
companies. And anytime that you have somebody else that comes in, then basically what they do is anything that's in development, they just clean house because they want to put their own
Yeah.
stamp on it. And that show just disappeared, and it broke my heart.
You couldn't take it anywhere else?
I think they tried, but it just never
Oh.
caught on anywhere else. Yeah.
Sounds like a great idea.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I've begged them to like let me have a copy of the pilot, and they've never given me a copy of the pilot because I think they're probably still shopping it to this day.
Oh, okay.
It was but man, it was cool. It looked so freaking cool.
Oh.
Yeah, it breaks my heart, but you win some, you lose some.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so just a general question. I don't want to go over every movie, but like so a general question, do you always go for R? Because even Molly Singer is R.
Yeah.
Everything you've done seems to be R. So do you have that power where someone's not going to come in and be like, no, we want PG-13?
I think honestly, in the next movie that I do, that's going to be uh, that's a project that may come up. I have another comedy that we're developing right now, and it's easily a movie that, like, much like Molly Singer, would only skew R for like language and maybe sort of inference of sexual situations and stuff like that. But this movie is one that you could argue would be much more effective and maybe more commercial at PG-13. I
Okay.
think I've always just done R because I love swearing. My mom was a teacher for 35 years, and I think that she was just the world's best swearer, and too many years of hanging out with bratty kids and stuff like that, and so I just love swear words so much that's really like the only reason that my movies would be I guess with the horror movies you have some gore and stuff like that
Yeah.
that would make them R. But yeah, I don't know, I just kind of gravitate towards bad language. I think it's fun.
Well, I'm trying. You should hear me outside this. I'm trying not to swear that much, but like, well, I mean, the only movie that you've had the word cunt in is Funhouse Massacre.
That's true. That's true. And
Yeah.
that was an improv line. That was not in the scripts. So,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
Matt Angel just fired that off, and it was really funny, I thought. So,
Oh, okay.
yep. But yeah, because like in Australia, correct me if I'm wrong, and even in like England, that's not as like that word in the US is like, that's the queen mother of dirty
Yeah.
words. Like, that's the one you
Oh
just
yeah.
don't say. I feel like in Australia and England, it gets thrown around a little bit more than it does here.
So there's a kind of a saying in Australia: if someone if someone aggressively calls you mate,
Yeah.
then you're in the shit. But if someone's like, how you going, you cunt?
Right.
It's very much an affectionate word
Yeah.
here. But some people don't like it. But for the most part, if you're meeting up with friends and all that, it's pretty much a normal word to throw around. But if you do it, you don't really use it aggressively.
Right.
The Brits do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty much a regular word here. The only real American thing that I've ever heard the word used over and over and over and over was in Deadwood.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. That movie, I mean, or that show, like that show needed its mouth washed out with soap. That was an absolute swear fest.
Oh,
But it
one of
really
my
became
favorite
an
shows.
art. Oh God, it's so good. My wife and I'll tell you a funny story about Deadwood. My wife and I were at Blockbuster. I had never watched it because I didn't have HBO for much of my life. And my wife and I were at Blockbuster, and there was a gentleman in there. We were looking for something to watch, and he goes, and he was like 6'2", and he had this like sort of sort of curly mustache, and he came in, he goes, you guys looking for something to watch? And we were like, yeah. And he goes, have you ever seen Deadwood? And I was like, no. And he goes, well, I'm in it. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Because in this point we were living in LA. And he's like, yeah, I was in like 6 episodes. I don't even know who this dude played. But I was like, well, I'm going to rent it just because, you recommended it and you were in the show. So we rented it. We watched like the first, because back in the day at Blockbuster, when you'd rent those shows, you didn't rent the whole series. You'd rent like the
Yeah.
first 4 episodes per disc, right? And so we rented it at like 6 o'clock. My wife and I watched like the first 3 episodes, and my wife goes, "Go back to Blockbuster and see if they have any more episodes." And so I drove back to Blockbuster, and I got like the next 2 discs or something like that.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the movie?
Yeah, I did. Timothy Oliphant is just always awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, a nice closing. But not maybe as much as I enjoyed the show.
Well, people were really divided on the movie, but I was like, look, I just want Ian McShane back and
Yeah.
Timothy Oliphant and everyone back. And I mean, he just, well, David has Alzheimer's as well. Considering a guy with Alzheimer's wrote that script, I was like,
Hmm.
he gets a good pass. He just wanted to end the story. Okay, it was pretty much a fan service movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas, he already had like a 4th series planned before it got cancelled. And there was meant to be a series about the Great Fire and everything.
Right. 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 Right.
So, yeah, we kind of got screwed. But, considering it did end the story. And even Gareth, who plays multiple characters,
Yeah.
I forget his name. He plays the guy who shoots God, I'm blanking on both their
No,
names.
I'm with you today. I don't know what it is if I haven't had enough caffeine, but I'm definitely I'm losing names today for sure.
Garrett Dilettant.
Okay.
Yeah. And he came back for a 5-second cameo at the end.
That's
And
I,
I
I
thought,
didn't even notice that. That's too funny.
and we got everyone back. Anyway, uh so yeah, is Bite Me getting made?
That's the movie I was just talking about. So we
Oh,
are
okay.
heavy in development in that right now. And we've had these strikes going on between the Writers Guild and then the
Yes, yes.
actors. So everything has ground to a complete halt. But now the Writers Guild thing is done. I hear the actors thing is going to be done pretty soon.
Okay.
We got the interim agreement through SAG, so we have been able to go out and to some, continue to go out to some actors for that movie. But yeah, right now we're just casting and trying to get people attached. But I think that's going to be the next one. It's an awesome story. It's something my dad came up with years ago, And you know, so it's special in that way to me. But it's a you know, sort of a family torn apart comedy set in the backdrop of professional bass fishing, because you know there hasn't been near enough
Okay.
movies made about bass fishing.
I don't really know any.
It's, if you ever get a chance to watch YouTube at night, just YouTube some of the professional bass fishing tournaments, and it's just like, it's like NASCAR with gills, man. And it's just
Really?
rife. It's just rife with comedy, you know, because it's really one of those things where it's like they hype up everything, but at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of people sitting in a boat fishing. And so I
Yeah.
love the sort of comedic dichotomy of trying to present something that's just rock and roll, and you know, but in its like truest form, it's like people being like, don't yell and scare the fish away. so,
All right. I gotta look
so
up bass fishing now.
yeah, it's really funny. It's really funny. I think it's going to be a really good movie.
So, on to Camp Cold Brook. We talked a little while about your career.
Yeah.
On to Camp Cold Brook. So how did you get involved with the film? I know Ben presented you with Funhouse, and Rochelle presented you with Badlands of Cain during Find Me.
Yeah.
So how did Alex get in touch with you about this?
That was actually so my manager had come about the script. It had been submitted to him, and he said that you know, he had read it and thought it was really good, and he knew that I also worked in reality television a lot, and so he knew that I had sort of a background in that world. I edit a lot of reality shows and stuff, so he thought I'd get a kick out of it, and I really did. I went. I really enjoyed the script. I thought Alex had done a very nice job. And it was a scary movie and stuff like that. So simultaneously to that, I had met with Joe Dante's partner, Mark. God, I don't know what is my deal with last names. I think I have not had enough water today. But he's another producer at Cold Brook. But Mark and I had met, and they were like, you know, Joe's doing these Joe Dante Presents projects. If you ever get anything that you think would be cool, that you know, would sort of do Joe's name right, let us know. And so I read Camp Cold Brook, and I was like, yeah, man, this could be that movie. So gave it to Warner. We reached out to Mark, and then Mark gave it to Joe. Joe liked it, and that was sort of how it happened. So Joe came on board to be the executive producer. That sort of got the ball rolling, and then yeah, from then on we had to just go find the financing and stuff, and that was that's how it all got put together. And we went and shot in Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I saw. I wrote down like the first. So you see the first production logos, and then you literally see Joe Dante Presents Camp Cold Brook, and I was like,
yeah,
yep, I would be putting that there too.
absolutely, front and center, you know. And you know, and the thing is like I went in and did a little pass on the script just to sort of also, you know, the different. And I'll never forget Joe, sitting down with Joe, because we told him how much we wanted to make the movie for and stuff like that, and he was like, how are you guys gonna build a summer camp for that amount of money? And we were like, oh, Joe, we're not gonna go build a summer camp. We're gonna just go find a summer camp and then, you know, shoot to it. And that, you know, that again becomes the difference of like working in studio films for so long, where in Joe's mind it was like, well, we got to go build a summer camp to match all of these elements that happen in the movie. And really what happens on an, you know, on an indie movie, going back to his Corman roots, is you go find a summer camp and then rework the script to fit, you know, like in the original script, it was like a big lake, but we didn't have a lake at that summer camp that we shot at. We had that sort of river that wound through the camp, and they had that bridge and stuff like that. And I was like, cool, we'll use the spillway here. So so I had to make readjustments to that. But then I went in and I also made just tons of Easter egg love letters to Joe, because Joe had done that in Gremlins. Like, you know, you have Rockin' Ricky Rialto in Gremlins, and it looks like his billboard looks like Indiana Jones. There's all these like kind of love letters to the guys that he worked with, and I wanted to do that for Joe. So I have Howling references and Gremlins references, and you know, pretty much any movie that Joe had done, I put a little shout out to in there.
Oh, that's great. So was he hands-on, or did he pretty much just say to you guys, here's money, go make what you want?
Not even money so much as like they didn't finance anything, but they lend Joe's name, and that helps you raise
Oh, okay.
financing. So yeah, so it wasn't it wasn't they weren't financing anything, but yeah, but just having Joe attached to it. And then Joe was, he was an amazing producer because he just gives you little, he gives you advice, but he's
Yeah.
not like, do this. He's not mandating anything. And so, yeah, it was really just getting amazing notes from him. And I remember when we watched the rough cut, we watched it at his house. He has his pool house. He had converted into this beautiful like home theater. And so we're sitting in his home theater and we watched the rough cut, and I'm like sitting next to him on the couch, and my heart's just going a mile a minute.
Yeah.
And this is the rough cut, mind you. This isn't even the final cut. So I was just like, oh boy. But I'll never forget that, like, the movie ends and then the lights come up and Joe goes, huh, well, that looked a hell of a lot better than it had any right to at that budget. I was like, all right, cool. And then we sat down and he gave me really amazing notes in post. And, I had, the beginning of the movie starts off right into the ghost hunting thing. But if you ever get the DVD for Cold Brook, I think it's in there. We actually shot an entire 12-minute opening of the film at the camp in, like, sort of the period piece when the kids get poisoned and stuff like that. And that was
Oh.
sort of my love letter to Joe. We lit it like a Dante movie, where it was like, that was the only part of the movie that was shot like sticks and dollies, and the blue moonlight, that sort of like made it try to feel like a Joe Dante movie, and then sort of ramp up and come into the present, and then it's sort of my movie. But it ended up just not. It felt disjointed, and that was sort of the feedback we were getting from people when they would watch it. Is like, we don't know what kind of movie this is, because it starts off as this sort of traditionally shot,
Oh.
80s style ghost movie, and then it's all handheld, and you have these like video cameras. We don't know what this movie is. And I remember Joe just being like, I didn't want to lose it, because I that was my love. That was like my thank you, Joe, sort of vibe.
Yeah.
And Joe's like, just lose it. He's like, you don't need it. It's not important to the story. And he's like, so don't get precious with it. And that was, and then so now we just sort of slam into the ghost hunting, and yeah, narratively it makes more sense. We know exactly who our characters are right off the bat.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to track down the Blu-ray because
It's Scream Factory has it, but yeah, I don't know if it's available worldwide.
yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of answered this, but like you got Joe Dante involved, and at the beginning it's like, oh my God, Joe Dante's involved, and then afterwards it could have become, oh fucking hell, I could have do a good job for Joe
Yeah.
Dante.
That you definitely, I felt the pressure of it, but Joe was very cool, and I think he enjoyed
Yeah.
the movie. I think he enjoyed that. He had done a couple of these other sort of Joe Dante presents, but there was never that sort of like tie-in to where I was like, hey, let's make this, like, let's do things that I think Joe would do and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I think he enjoyed the film. I hope he enjoyed the film. And we had a really, like, and I'll never forget, like, just the memories we had. He came out to we premiered it at Horror Hound in Indianapolis, Indiana. And he came out for the screening, and then we got to go out to dinner, and that was probably one of the most enjoyable moments of the whole process of making the movie. Was sitting at this old steakhouse down in the basement of the steakhouse with Joe and Mark, and just talking movies, and kind of like
Oh
picking
yeah.
his brain on. And the thing about Joe is, I don't think Joe ever set out to be a filmmaker. I think he wanted to be an animator, and
Oh,
started
okay.
working for Corman, and that's and it sort of snowballed from there. And that really gave me like good perspective in terms of, like, you know not everyone that has sort of his level of success and stuff like that actually set out to do. They didn't, like, they're not all Spielberg that were like shooting home movies from the time they were 9 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it was just really nice to talk to him about his other interests and stuff like that.
Well, it's also like Tarantino. He, Reservoir Dogs is pretty much a stage play.
Yeah.
And, it's like it's got his hallmark of pretty much just talking.
Yeah. That's true.
That's all it is. It's talking, and people, went nuts for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I sometimes think I sometimes think I came in at like a generation too late because these were the guys that I really looked up to. Tarantino, Rodriguez, Kevin Smith,
Yeah.
Edward Burns. Those were all the guys that, like, when I wanted to become a filmmaker, they were the young guys doing it, and I always appreciated all their stories and stuff like that. And I try to capture, that as much as possible. But the industry's definitely changed, and like we're in a new place where algorithms count, and you start getting notes from streamers and stuff like that. We're like, oh, well, is this movie really good second screen? And what they're telling you is that, like, does this movie play when somebody's watching their cell phone as their primary screen? And you're just like, oh my God, how are we to tell a story if we're worrying about these elements? And that these are the challenges that, like, we have to deal with now as filmmakers. And I don't know. I feel like I may have come in like one generation late, because I definitely identify more with those guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of a reason why I'm doing this. So I don't want to be critical about movies because there's too many movie critics on
Yeah,
YouTube.
believe me,
Who wants to hear my opinion?
reviews for Molly Singer.
I will do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I looked on Rotten Tomatoes and God, it went bloody bad. But the user scores were
Oh
actually
yeah.
quite good.
And that's why I literally, if like you ever see my when I send out my director, like, I have a deck that has like all my movies and my highlights and stuff that I'll send to production companies or agents and stuff like that. And that's what I talk about in my director statement. Is like, I got into movies because I love movies, and I love movies for the fact that I want to go to the video store and pick out a movie and go to the basement with my friends and watch this movie, and we
Yeah.
rewatch it and stuff like that. That's why I got into movies. So yeah, that's been the one thing about Molly Singer, is it was disappointing that, like, a lot of the critics didn't get it, although the ones that did get it really got everything I was going for, and I was like, amazing, that is exactly what we were going for. But the user, yeah, the audience score is like 93%, and I'm like,
Yeah.
that's why. And it's funny, I went back and looked at sort of similar movies to ours, and that seems to track. I looked at like Waiting, and Waiting had like a 17% critics and like an 80 audience, and I was like, okay, I
Oh
think this
yeah.
is that type of movie where it's just like the critics are just going to hate on it, and people are going to love it.
Oh, quite a few movies end up being like that. But that's the question. Do the studios give a shit about the professional reviews, or
They
do
do.
they actually care more about the audience?
They do. They care about the critic stuff, because I don't know what it is, but if you look up something like Molly Singer, or you look up Cold Brook, or any of my movies, sans Funhouse, ironically, Funhouse being my only fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. But if you look up the movie, you go to iTunes or Apple TV or any of these places, they will just put the Rotten Tomato score right there. And so it's just like, to me, that's like completely unfair, because it's just like,
Yeah.
oh, this movie's shit. Good luck. And it's like, you're not doing, I don't understand what that does, how that like helps, because it's like a movie that gets these amazing Rotten Tomato scores, everybody already knows about.
Oh
Anything
yeah.
that's that critically acclaimed, everybody already knows about. So then if you put an indie movie that people haven't heard of or they need to discover, but then you just put a shitty score there, and they're like, well, I'm not going to watch that. It's not good. And I'm like, well,
Why
I'm
would
not
I
going to
check
buy
it
it
out?
or watch it. Yeah, why would I check it out? And I'm like, that to me seems like a really stupid, way to go about doing business, because you're not enticing people to go watch something that they may not have watched to begin with.
Yeah. Well, the only real reviewers I do watch is Red Letter Media.
Mm.
If you know who they are.
I don't know who they
Oh,
are, but I
okay.
will look them up. Yeah, I'll look them up.
They kind of just shoot the shit.
Nice.
So they don't go on score or try and. Well, have you heard of the Plinkett reviews?
I have not. No.
He did like a video essay on Star Wars, the
Oh,
prequels,
okay.
and yeah, I'm surprised someone in the industry doesn't know them, but not everyone does.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
try to just not pay attention to it, and I'm with you. I agree with what you said, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
Oh,
I
good.
agree with you that it's like I don't want to publicly be critical of movies, because I know how hard it is to make a movie,
Yeah.
and so it's like I might not enjoy something, but that's just my effing opinion, and so it's just like I don't want to like dissuade anybody else from going to see a movie.
Well, my goal here is to sort of, like, as I said, Camp Cold Brook, one of my favorites. And I know that it didn't really get that well received or
Yep.
done as you said. But I watch it and I'm like, oh, the cinematography, and I'm like, and there are shots, like various shots throughout where I'm like, they definitely waited until the sun was like just
Yeah, yeah.
stuck in there,
Yep.
and then they're like, all right, we're shooting now.
Yep.
And
For
I was
sure.
like, you have to wait this time, and then you have to set up shots, and you have to redo it again. And if the light doesn't go well, you're just like, oh my god, we might have to shoot this fucking later. So I'm more of the mind that even if I don't really like a movie, I'm like, mainly indie films, I'm like, God, this shot probably took ages to set up though. So,
Yep.
and this effect and that effect, like they made the Winnie the Pooh horror movie.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Yeah. The guy that
and I
scored Witness Infection scored that movie.
okay,
So yeah, same composer. Yeah. Andrew
and
Andrew something something. God, man, my names are off today.
I think they were all costumes, and it's like those costumes look really good.
Hmm.
Someone put a lot of work into making sure those costumes look bloody great.
Yeah.
So, I'm more of, I want your opinion on the movie. That's
I
that's
appreciate.
what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get from this. No one wants to hear my bloody opinion. Who the
Well,
hell am I?
I think that's really cool though. I think that's sort of a fresh. I think it's and it'll be It'll be interesting as you go through this, and I'm going to follow you because I want to see how this goes. I want to see. I think that directors fall into like a lot of different camps, and so I'll be
Yeah.
interested to see. I'm very like, I grew up a chubby kid. I'm still fat, so I'm very self-deprecating. It's very easy for me to be hard on myself. I use that as sort of my protection, and so it's very easy for me to be critical of my stuff because I've always sort of like leaned on that crutch. But there are directors that are like, "This is my art. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened."
Oh yeah.
And if you didn't get it, then you don't get anything. And so I'll be interested to see of like what sort of camps different directors that you talk to fall into.
Oh yeah. Well, that's why I'm kind of doing this as, like, this was a few years ago, because you make a movie and then you could be either of the mind that it's finished, like, that you did the commentary track, but I'm guessing that was pretty much right after or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, very
Whereas
soon after.
whereas like 5 years later, you're like, you look back at it and you're like, oh, was it shit? Was it good?
Yeah,
Whereas, as I was saying, when you've just finished it and you're trying to promote it, you don't want to shit on it.
right.
And you, but you could also be of the mind, oh my God, thank God that's bloody over. Or, yes, it's an amazing film. It's the greatest thing ever. And then five
Well,
years later, you're like, okay, this was wrong. And oh, this and maybe this. So,
to that
yeah,
end,
that's,
let me ask you a question because this is really interesting because I think about this a lot. What did you think of the ending of Camp Cold Brook?
oh, see, I loved it because it was, well, yeah, I was gonna get to that later, but now you're asking. It was down tempo. It was kind of anticlimactic.
Right.
It wasn't big. It wasn't loud. She came out, and then Candace's character. God, I can't
Hmm.
remember her name right now. I've got it written down. Candace's character. She is kind of the one behind it,
Yeah.
and then Jack fucking gets he faints.
Yep. Yep.
And then he wakes up in the hospital, and we've got that scene, and then the kids and all that. And I was like, that is great. I
Good.
loved
I'm
it
glad. I'm
because,
glad. I'm glad because I'm very critical of the ending. And so I'm glad that you liked it. Because yeah, I'm critical of it. I feel like I really should have taken that in a different direction and had like, done it in a way where it felt like a little bit more tragic, where like the sheriff and the mom show up at the end, like the next
oh yeah,
morning, and no one's there, like no one's there to be found, and leave it like much more mysterious, like all the gears around and everyone else has disappeared. But I'm glad that you liked it, because it's something that I look back a little bit critically of.
Okay. Wait, I'm trying to remember her name. I've got it written down.
Oh, she was Angela in the movie.
Angela. So,
Yeah.
the one thing I will say about the ending that I was kind of critical about was that Jack wakes up and then his wife is like, oh, he sees the wife and he's like, so where's Angela?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. Yep.
and then she's like, oh, she's out there.
Yep. Yep.
And I was surprised that Jack wasn't like, well, she's the one that set this all up. Get that
Yep.
bitch away from me. Fuck
Yep.
her off.
Yep.
That's
These are
kind of
things.
what I.
Yeah, and it's like what happened to Daniel Harris's character? Oh, no, sorry, Daniel Harris is Angela.
Oh yeah.
Geez, man, it's like my own movie, but it's like been a really long day, and I've been editing all day. I could name you every girl on my show right now that I'm cutting on this show right now. That's for sure.
But I've got it
But
written down. Emma.
Emma, that's what it
Yeah.
is. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
that like I agree with you. I think that like what happened to Angela? Why doesn't he like kind of go crazy when Emma's there? I feel like we take like a lot of leaps to sort of get to this sort of nice twist ending with the kids, which I think that does work, but there's certain elements that don't work to it. And yeah, I definitely have regrets on that. That's the sort of thing that like on an indie film, you don't have any sort of luxury of going back. Like, in studio films, if something like that happens, they would be doing focus
Reshoots.
groups and all these, yeah, and they'd be like, this doesn't work, go shoot it again. And on an indie film, you're just kind of laying bare for everybody, and that makes it very scary. I'll tell you that much.
Um.
So
So with auditions, did Candace and Michael have to audition, or were you just like, they were in Funhouse?
yeah,
Funhouse
that
came
that was pretty much it.
after
Yeah,
this?
that was pretty
No,
much it.
Funhouse
Yeah,
came
yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I liked Candace a lot, and she became sort of a fan favorite. Playing Dollface, and she's just the nicest, sweetest person. And the thing that like I liked about her that she did so well in Funhouse Massacre is like she was very emotive with very few lines,
Yeah.
and in sort of a big animated way. But Emma is like much more like sort of subdued. But
Oh yeah.
but Candace is so good, and you know that there's something up with her the whole time, but you can't quite put your finger on it. And so yeah, I in that realm she felt perfect. And then I'm a huge Danielle Harris fan.
Oh yeah. I was
So
gonna
that
say.
was it. I mean, she's amazing. Not only as an actress, but she's just so cool, man. Like
Yeah.
she's like this rock star of a person that you like. She comes on set and you're just like you're like somebody just want to hang out with. She's very cool. Chad, very nice. And then Mikey was actually, it was funny. We actually tried to get Paul Soder for that part.
Oh
And
okay.
Paul schedule it wise couldn't do it, and then I pitched Mikey to Warner, and Warner was like, oh yeah, Mikey Reed would be great, and so yeah, so Mikey came out and did it.
I'm a fan of Victorious, the TV show, and he
Yep,
was he was
yep,
St. John.
yep.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so you were like Danielle Harris, you're like, fuck it, I want her.
That was the
Yeah.
first. She was like the first person that we cast and the first choice that I had to play Angela for sure.
Okay. Yes, further down, I have a question. Why has Candace not been in any more movies?
It's a question. I don't know. I don't
Because
know that
she's
she's
fantastic.
acting. Yeah, I think she also did modeling and stuff like that. And so I think she did that. But it's funny. I haven't talked to her in quite a while, and I don't know why
Oh.
she hasn't done more stuff. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Oh. Um, oh yeah, what cameras were used for the movie? So one thing I've written down and watching all your movies. So you do indie films, but you
Hmm.
always have like nice looking cameras. There's sort of you sort of have the feel of an A24 film because it's
Hmm.
not overly cinematic and Hollywood, but it's still indie. It feels like an indie film, but not like a full out B movie. And
Yeah,
you
yeah, yeah.
always get nice quality stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So definitely, I've shot different cameras for every movie, and the cameras almost act like film stock, where you're like, where back in the day it was like everybody was shooting on Panavision, but you use different film stocks to elicit different, moods and stuff like that. You almost do that with
Yeah.
cameras now because they all look different.
Yeah.
So on Cold Brook, we actually shot on Panasonic Vericams, and the reason we shot on the Vericam was they were the first camera to offer what they call dual native ISO. So basically, you have a native ISO, which is the exposure level to which the camera shows its biggest dynamic range. It's from the whites to the
Oh, okay.
shadows. And the thing about the Panasonic, and now a lot of cameras do this, but Panasonic was the first one to do it, is that they have a native ISO of 800, and you shoot that during the day when you have more available light. But then when you get into nighttime, you could switch the ISO to native like 3200. And so
Okay.
then all of a sudden that sensor captures way more light without noise, without that sort of like bad digital mosquito noise that you
Yeah.
get when you shoot at night. And that was a lifesaver because we didn't have a huge budget and we had to light up an entire swath of camp and stuff like that. And so that
Yeah.
camera, you would switch to that other ISO, and then you didn't need near as many lights. And it's amazing.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
What was the budget on the movie?
750,000.
Really?
Yeah.
You guys did a good job with that, because
We stretched the heck out of it. Yeah, we did.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Just a funny little tidbit. So getting into the studio exec side of things, do studio execs drink during the day like John did with Jack at the start of the film, or is that a movie trope?
No, I think that's just a fun movie trope, and like it's something that like I don't know. I always picture like it was like, oh, this is my Madman scene, and Courtney Gaines who played the exec in that movie. I love him. He was in Funhouse, and then also he was in The Burbs with Joe Dante and stuff like that. So that was sort of our fun crossover actor. And I just love the idea of Courtney with his bourbon in his hand, and stuff like that. But that's just sort of it's like in a movie when the director is always wearing like a scarf and like, he just has that sort of directory look and stuff. I just had that vision in my head for that sort of, pompous studio exec.
Just one funny thing I wanted to say. Kevin says he would like a coffee, and Jack says, no, we got a lot to do. And then he takes a swig of coffee.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love that.
It was always that thing that like, I always wanted Kevin's character to be like, he thinks he's too good to be there. And everybody makes sure to like always sort of subtly let him know that no one is impressed by him. And so that was sort of the laying of the tracks of that, is he thinks he's this big bad DP, and stuff like that. And that was sort of me poking at my DP Philippe Vandewall, because he's there's a really funny running joke, and it's basically what's the difference between God and a DP, and the punchline is God doesn't think he's a DP. So that was sort of like the auspice of Kevin, is that he just thinks that he was like, he ruled all and everything like that, and everybody always sort of put him in his place.
Okay. Well, you edit reality shows and everything, so I'm gonna say, are you a fan of paranormal shows, and were you trying to parody them with the intro, or more go for a mock?
No, yeah, sort of a parody of that thing, because it's like coming up in reality shows, I know how they're crafted and stuff like that. And so, and then Jack says it to he says it to the exec, where he's just like, there's no wind machines, there's no this or that, this is the real deal. And you're like, no, it's not. It's gonna all be that, it's all sort of hooey, and you're creating drama and stuff like that. So yeah, it was more just a parody on those shows. I remember as a kid being terrified of Unsolved Mysteries and Robert Stack sort of walking through the foggy, graveyard, and he's like, with every mystery there lies an answer, and that great voice. And so when Jack comes through the hallway, I wanted that sort of Robert Stack Unsolved Mysteries look with the blue light and stuff like that. But that's one of my like hidden Easter eggs, is that what Jack is saying is actually what Billy Peltzer's dad was his invention motto in in Gremlins. It's
Oh.
like we make that, we make the I can't remember, we make the impossible possible, or whatever Jack says in that mode. That was actually taken from Gremlins. That was Billy Peltzer's dad's motto.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So location scouting and set design and yeah. How did you find the camp?
Yeah, by like sheer luck. We were having a really, really hard trouble. We knew we wanted to shoot in Oklahoma because of the tax incentive. But we were having an incredibly hard time finding a camp because most summer camps in the States are church camps. And so the moment that the church found out that we were shooting a horror movie, they were like, nope, we don't want your
Yeah.
business. And so we were very lucky that we found Camp Dakini, and it was right outside of Oklahoma City, which was amazing too, because a lot of these are out in the middle of nowhere, and we would have to like truck the crew out and stuff like that. This was right outside the city. They had just let out, and I mean, it was literally just doing an internet search. We had already been in Oklahoma, and we were like, all right, we got to try to find something. And it was
Okay.
awesome in that regard, yeah. And then Jennifer Herbal, I mean, it was a working camp. They had kids there 2 weeks before we were there.
Yeah.
So Jennifer Herbal and her crew went in and made it look super, with the exception of like, and we always catch shit for this, is like the grass was mowed. I'm like, well, listen, we didn't have the money to like create overgrowth and stuff. But what Jennifer and her crew did with like those rooms that looked just super old and just like the rooms that time forgot and the cabins that time forgot, I thought she did an amazing job.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's one thing I pointed out when I initially got in touch with you. I was like, that the set design was amazing. But
Yeah, she's great.
so, did people really give you shit because the
Yep.
grass?
Yep. I get you. Go online and people are like, "What's this summer camp? It's overgrown, yet the grass is all mowed." I mean, this is like the level of stuff that you always catch from people, and you're like, "Yeah, man, that's the byproduct of shooting on a budget where you can't go and create that overgrowth." Because on the flip side, there was another camp that we really liked, but it was 60 miles down the road, and so we would have had to like put the entire crew up at hotels, which we couldn't afford. And the other problem, and this is a real problem in August in Oklahoma, that is when copperheads they give birth. And so there was a lot. We had 2 like poisonous snakes on set that we had like a wrangler on set for, that like the thing comes over the PA, hey, there's a snake in Crafty, it's definitely poisonous, and the snake guy has to go take care of it. But the thing about this other camp was it was all overgrown. It was completely abandoned. But it would have been dangerous because it would have been Snake City, man. Snake City over there. So, and we don't have the budget to have people go and like, find all the snakes and get them out of there.
Was there much storyboarding on the movie?
Not at all. No, not at all.
Okay.
That was, at that point we were in, that was when I was with Philippe, and I were in this realm of, blocking stuff. Now, on the flip side, certain scare moments, yes, you really sort of really like map those out, i.e. the shot where Jack's in the building at the beginning and the little kids kind of vanish from the shadows. Like that was a shot that I had in mind. But as far as like movement goes, no, it's just like, now it's like, okay, let's place the actors, let's move them here, here, and here, and then the shots sort of develop, and it just creates a fun, organic like look to the movie, I think.
Yeah. So we've talked about shots and temperature of shots, but like as I said, there's quite a few times where you really picked a particular time of day to shoot, and they always look good. And even at the start, when Jack comes home and the sun is setting, and then it comes through like the door as well, and I'm like,
yeah,
such a great shot.
So movie magic here, just to let you know. The exterior of that house was actually shot as a pickup in California. That was my old house in California when my wife and I lived up in Bakersfield, which is it's like 2 hours north of Los Angeles. And then the interior, when Jack comes home, that was all in Oklahoma. That house that we shot in for Jack's house was like a model home. It was like a spec home for a new neighborhood that was being built. And I saw it and I was like, well, what are they doing with it? That's just, and all the furniture's in there already. So that I literally went into the place and was like to the realtors, and I'm like, I'm shooting a movie. Can we shoot here? And they thought that was so cool. But if you stepped
Oh, okay.
outside, all you would see was like new construction of homes. There were no, like, it wasn't like a neighborhood. So we always knew we had to, like, later in life get that shot of Jack coming home on the exterior.
All right.
Yeah. So we shot that
It's
first, and
a good
then
thing to know.
knowing that sun was coming in, because I always love that, like, sort of warm sunlight coming through the windows look and stuff like that. We knew that, like, when we did the pickups, we were going to have to shoot at a very particular time of day to match that.
Okay. Um, with in regards to like shots and like temperature, do you play with the saturation or anything much?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, different moods elicit, different feelings and stuff like that. So when we were shooting the beginning of the movie, I wanted everything to feel really like warm, much warmer, and stuff like that. And so it's like, yeah, when Jack comes home, it's nice and warm. Their office where the ghost hunters are and stuff like that, that was like very warm,
Yeah.
warmly lit and stuff like that. And then as the movie sort of progressively goes on, I wanted to get like colder and colder feeling with it. And so you start to see these like blue tones come in much more heavily,
Yeah.
and the sort of sicky green tones come in a little bit more heavily. Yeah, and I think that sort of puts people in a mood.
Yeah. And adds to the the look of the shot
Yeah,
in
for
general.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So you do seem to always get good shots, as I've pointed out. The plane shot is really nice, and then it turns into an establishing shot.
Yeah. So the
And I
establishing
like
shot
that.
is us. Yeah, the establishing shot is us. I will say this though, that plane shot is a stock shot. That is like
Oh, okay.
from a stock library. Yep, yep. But I wish I could take credit for it. But yeah, the all the drone stuff was us for sure. And then that sort of like great sort of cascading American planes sort of out the window shot. I like that shot a lot too.
Yeah, well, when it comes to drone shots, most movies seem to be like, oh, we've got a drone, let's put drone shots. But you seem to really play with it and
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, yeah. I hate drone shots that feel like they're shot from a drone. That's the one thing that those helicopter aerials would always capture, is some sort of like feeling of like good parallax. And so it's like, yeah, if you look at my sort of, whenever I use a drone, I'm always coming up over an angle, or I'm trying to kind of buzz things and stuff. I don't I really am not a fan of like the sort of top down drone shot.
yeah, yeah.
It just, because you're just like, oh, that just feels so much like a drone. So I try to create a little bit more excitement in
Oh,
those
okay.
drone
Yeah.
shots. Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, everyone just does drone shots, and then it's just like, well, it's been done. Everyone can do it. So
yeah, yeah,
as you said, it's just, and you do seem to, you have been working with your cinematographer for a good while now.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he,
I mean, I talk to him daily. We talk every day. We're very good
oh,
friends,
okay.
and I've learned more about film from him. He's just a pure cinephile, much more than I am, and I've learned so much about filmmaking from him that I just, I really look forward every time we do something together. He teaches me more things, and I feel super blessed that I get to work with him, and I hope to work with him a lot more.
It's good to meet people like that. So I have done a bit of acting, but I'm mainly a opera performer, and
Oh wow.
I did meet. So I got back into performing in plays, but it was like a short play, and bloody shit. Um, it was a short play, and I met someone who, and now we kind of co-produce things together.
That's great. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
You need
So
that. You
it's
need that team. You do. You need that core for sure.
um you seem to like low angle shots as well. Some shots of people are talking are quite different. Instead of like face on, you
Yeah.
really like to go for low angle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Like, when we shoot, even when we shoot handheld and stuff like that, very rarely does like the cameraman ever have like the camera on their shoulder, because I think that's more of like, it feels more newsy. That sort of like straight on. I definitely like to play with angles. Low angle is tough in regards to like, it has to be the right set, because oftentimes if you're shooting low angle into a ceiling, that's something that production design might not have like a very good it might not look interesting and stuff. So we always try to, dress sets that look like you could do 360. But yeah, low angle is always a good, an interesting way to shoot things for sure. And it's funny
Yep.
in Molly Singer, because it was a comedy, I shot it much more sort of like the main body of the scenes. I wanted to shoot a little bit more simply so that within the time frame we had, the actors had more reps. Because to me, like, the comedy is all about, it's all about the actors and the lines and stuff. And so it's like, I didn't want to like overly stylize it in a way where I couldn't like get a lot of reps with them. So the body of the movie is shot sort of probably more simply than anything I've done. But what I try to do is create ins and outs of every scene that were really visually fun and interesting, so that it still felt like a me movie where there's like really good camera movement and
Yeah.
things, still felt interesting. So yeah. Samuel, I am like enjoying the heck out of this. I got to go pretty soon because I'm still actually working. I got to work for a few more hours on the show I'm on. But I literally could talk to you all day long if I could.
um. All right. I'll skip a couple of questions. Yeah. Well, we've discussed the ending and how pretty down tempo it is, and it wasn't really CGI. Was there much CGI in it, or
No.
was it all costumes and practical?
Yeah. Pretty much all practicals. The only CGI, it was just like little repair things where you just had to like for instance, the drone shot, right, where they come up and you see the golf cart, the sheriff's carrying them into the town. What you see is like sort of the roof line of the director's cottage of the thing of the
Yeah.
camp. Well, like I said, it's a working camp. So when you come up on that shot in real life, that roof looked brand new. It looked like they put it in last year. And so those were like little CG things where it's like then it's all rusted and beat down. And so those were like the little CG elements that we would incorporate just to buy sort of the aging of everything.
Okay. Um. Yeah. Do you get much promotion outside of Australia? Outside of America? Because as I said, in Australia, there's not really much.
Yeah, it's international distribution on smaller films is very it's very tricky, but B, it's always like you just don't know. Funhouse is like it's like such a tale of two things because Funhouse was sold foreign and it played big, very big internationally. Like it's still on Netflix. It never came out on Netflix in the US, but it's on Netflix in Ireland and London. Like when I went to Ireland and London with my wife, I pop on Netflix and there was my movie on Netflix, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And it came out in Australia and stuff like that. But then on the flip side, the company that we went through filed bankruptcy, and we never saw a dollar for the on the
Okay.
foreign side for the movie. And Camp Cold Brook was the same thing. It's like it sold quite a few places, but we never have seen too much success with it. So it's really the foreign market's very tricky. It's very
Yeah.
tricky to navigate, and I have no idea. Molly Singer honestly has been probably my most successful. We've sold quite a few territories, so that's gonna see a lot of
Well, that's
different
good.
places. Yeah.
Um. Well, so I did want to, like, as I said, a big thing about this is getting your thoughts. So, what are your thoughts on Camp Cold Brook at this point?
I think that it is a much better movie than it was sort of credited as being. I think that we have amazing actors. I think Chad, Danielle, Mikey, and Candace are all incredibly talented actors. In addition to all the local actors that we had in the movie from Oklahoma as well, and I think there's some like genuine scares. It is like my love letter to Joe Dante, and I always invite people to go back and watch it. If nothing else, to go try to find all the Easter eggs, because there's so many. There is like probably like 15 or 16 little tiny references to Joe Dante movies, and I was shocked that like not as many people got them. But I'm
Yeah.
just such a movie fan, Maybe I made them too hard because there's some very easy ones, but then there's some other ones that are just incredibly, these sort of like tiny, funny Easter eggs. Um, so in that regard, I feel like we accomplished what we wanted, and just talking to somebody like you that sort of gets what we were going for. and appreciates what we were going for, that, like, to me means everything.
Oh,
I'm
good.
bummed that it didn't do as well, because I think it was, I think it was a good movie. It definitely has its flaws. I have found, making Funhouse Massacre, making Witness Infection, making Molly Singer, I always got into movies wanting to do comedy, because I'm a I'm a comedy fan. Horror movies is just how I started out, and sort of morphed, but it's definitely not my strong suit. Like, creating tension on set and stuff like that is not my strong suit. A comedic scene I can direct, and I know exactly what's wrong with it. I know exactly how to fix it. I know exactly what the actor needs to say, and I'm much more confident. Tension, I'm constantly sitting at the monitor going, is this scary enough? Am I drawing this out enough? Is this angle right? It's really exciting and it's very thrilling, but it doesn't come naturally to me. And having
Okay.
watched now, like, the director from Marshmallow, the movie I'm editing right now, or I have another director friend, Samuel Gonzalez Jr., who's a genius in the horror movie realm. Seeing how easily they do that, the way that I sort of easily can navigate comedy on set, I'm like, yeah, I need to leave I need to leave the horror to probably more, more skilled guys when it comes to the scares.
All
But
right.
I will say that I think there's a few times in Camp Cold Brook that we effectively created it.
Oh yeah. Well, we could get into that, but you don't have time.
Not today, but
um,
let's do this again. This was just such a blast, man.
yeah, I was gonna ask if you would be interested in maybe talking about other films, because as I said,
Absolutely.
I went through all of them. Just so as I said, I want to go over the movie and get in touch with you, but is there any chance you could get me in touch with Alex and
Oh
I
yeah, of
could
course. Absolutely. Oh my, he'll be
discuss?
over. He'll be 100% over the moon. I will hit him up today, and I'll probably have him just reach out to you on Instagram like you reached out to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
And yeah, absolutely, he'll be over the moon.
And there's no chance of getting in touch with Candace, is there?
Possible. I haven't talked to her in a while, but I still have her phone number. I'll shoot her a text. Yeah.
um, is there see, I'm asking too much, but I do want to ask, is there any chance of getting like little stills or something to make the video a bit unique, like
Sure.
production
Yeah.
stills or
Yeah.
B-roll or
Absolutely.
something like that?
Absolutely, man. No problem. I can do that. I can do that for you too. If you want, I'll send you like a downloadable copy of the movie. You can use some clips from the
Oh,
movie.
awesome.
Yeah, you can use clips from the movie, and then I'll send you a bunch of stills that I have for sure.
Uh, okay. I'm gonna let you go, but like, I do really appreciate this because you're my first actual interview, and when I decided to start this up, I was like, well, if I'm gonna do it, I do want to do one of my favorite underrated films, which is Camp Cold Brook, and I mean, getting to talk to you is just an awesome thing for me.
Well, I'm so glad, man. I'm really glad you reached out. I mean, it means the world to me, and I'm just so glad you love the movie as much as I love the movie.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it means so much to me. I mean, that's why I make them. So it's like, yeah, this has been a pleasure, and hopefully, I set the bar high for your next filmmaker that's on your show.
Well, I got someone tomorrow, but completely different film as well and different filmmaker. Um, yeah. Oh, by the way, I didn't realize until yesterday, but today's my birthday, and I was like, oh, I did this on I
Happy
did this
birthday!
for
That's
my
amazing.
birthday. And I was like,
Congratulations. That's awesome.
oh
Well,
my
happy birthday.
God. Oh,
Happy
thanks.
birthday, dude.
So I did just want to make sure. So bits of what you're saying will go in the video, not everything, but just bits. But
Mhm.
are you okay with me posting this as a side video as well?
Yeah, of course, whatever you need. Yeah, I
All
don't
right,
think I
great.
made too much of an ass of myself on this one.
Oh, I just tried not to talk too much because I would rather get your thoughts. And again, who wants to hear me talk? It's all about you guys.
There we go. That sounds good. That's the mark of a good interviewer right there.
Uh, well, I did try. I didn't want to ask the usual questions, so I do hope I actually came up with a interesting interview.
Nope, it was really fun. I mean, listen, we've been going for an hour. We've been going
I'm
for what, an
good.
hour and 45 minutes. So yeah, you've done an amazing job.
Oh, thanks. Um, All right, well, I better let you get back to work, but
Yep.
yeah, I definitely hope you are able to get me in touch with people, and
Yeah,
I would really appreciate that.
I'll reach out to Alex and Candace and see what they're up to. Alex, I know for sure will be down. He'll be over the
Great.
moon, like I said, and I'll hit up Candace. And then I think I have your email, and I'll send you a link that you could have the movie to cut up some clips and then send you some stills as well.
Awesome. And are you able to send me that 12-minute thing that you mentioned of the camp at the beginning that was cut out?
I will see if I can dig that out. That's going to live on a hard drive somewhere. That one I can't guarantee, but I will 100% try to find it.
Okay, but if not, it's not essential.
Yeah, no, I'll try to give it a look see.
All right. Well, again, I really appreciate this. This was a very awesome experience for me.
Samuel, for me too. Happy birthday, brother! I'm super glad I got to hang out with you on your birthday.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Right on. All right,
it
my
was
man.
good talking.
Good talking with you. We'll talk to you later, buddy.